The warm Gulf breeze caressed Olivia Mitchell's face as she stood on the balcony of her modest apartment in Key West, Florida. At 28, she had built a respectable life for herself as a marine biologist at the local research center, but something was missing. Her gaze drifted toward the horizon where the ocean met the sky in a seamless blend of blues. Despite her love for the ocean and its creatures, an undeniable restlessness had been growing within her for months. Another grant application rejected, she sighed, tossing the letter onto the small patio table. Her research on coral reef preservation needed funding, and the local institutions simply didn't have the resources she required. Her colleague, Marissa, had suggested she attend the International Environmental Conservation Conference in New York, where potential donors and sponsors would be present. What do I have to lose? Olivia whispered to herself, making the decision that would ultimately change the course of her life forever. 2 weeks later, Olivia found herself in a sleek black dress that she had splurged on for the occasion, standing in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. The opulence surrounding her was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, marble columns, and people whose watches probably cost more than her annual salary. She clutched her glass of champagne, feeling woefully out of place among the environmental, elite and wealthy philanthropists. "You look like you'd rather be swimming with sharks than standing here," a deep voice remarked from behind her. Olivia turned to face a tall man with piercing blue eyes and dark hair touched with distinguished silver at the temples. His tailored suit spoke of wealth, but there was something approachable in his smile. "Is it that obvious?" she replied with a small laugh. "I'm more comfortable in a wetsuit than evening wear." "Jackson Harrington," he extended his hand. "And you are?" "Olivia Mitchell. I'm a marine biologist from Key West." She shook his hand, noting his firm grip and the warmth in his touch. "Ah, a woman who speaks to the ocean," he said, his eyes lighting up with genuine interest. "I'd much rather hear about that than discuss another tax write-off with these people." There was something magnetic about Jackson Harrington that drew Olivia in immediately. Perhaps it was the way he listened intently as she described her research, or how his questions showed a genuine understanding of environmental issues. By the end of the evening, she'd learned he was one of America's most influential energy magnates, the CEO of Harrington Enterprises, with interests spanning from renewable energy to real estate development. "My company has been looking to invest in marine conservation projects," Jackson told her, as they shared a quiet corner of the ballroom. "Your research on coral reef restoration sounds exactly like the kind of initiative we want to support." Olivia couldn't believe her luck. "That would be incredible. My team has been struggling with funding for years." "Consider it done," Jackson said with a confident smile that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. "But I'd like to discuss the details further, perhaps over dinner tomorrow night." The following evening found Olivia at Le Bernardin, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. What she had expected to be a business dinner quickly evolved into something more personal. Jackson was charismatic, worldly, and seemed genuinely fascinated by her passion for marine life. "I've never met anyone quite like you, Olivia," he confessed over dessert. "Most people in my circle are only interested in what they can gain from a relationship with me." "I'm just a scientist who loves the ocean," she replied, feeling a blush creep up her cheeks under his intense gaze. "You're far more than that," he responded, his voice low and intimate. What followed was a whirlwind romance that seemed pulled from the pages of a fairy tale. Jackson extended his stay in New York to spend time with Olivia, and when she needed to return to Key West, he flew down on his private jet to visit her. Within a month, Olivia's modest apartment had been filled with rare orchids. Her weekends were spent on Jackson's luxury yacht, and her research project had received the most substantial grant in the history of her research center, courtesy of the Harrington Foundation. "He's hiding something," Marissa warned one afternoon as they catalogued coral samples in the lab. "No one is that perfect, Liv, and this is all happening so fast." "You're just being cynical," Olivia dismissed her friend's concerns. "Not everyone has ulterior motives." But late at night, when Jackson would take mysterious phone calls and step away, or when certain topics about his business dealings would cause him to change the subject abruptly, a small seed of doubt would plant itself in her mind. There was a heaviness in his eyes sometimes, a weariness that suggested he carried burdens he wasn't sharing. 3 months into their relationship, during a weekend in his Hamptons estate, Jackson took Olivia on a moonlit walk along his private beach. "I've never believed in destiny until I met you," he said, stopping to face her. The moonlight silvered his features, making him look almost otherworldly. "You've brought something into my life that I didn't know was missing." Before she could respond, he dropped to one knee on the sand, presenting a ring with a diamond, so large it caught the moonlight and fractured it into 1,000 sparkling points. "Olivia Mitchell, will you marry me?" The question hung in the air between them. A voice in the back of her mind whispered cautions. They had known each other for only a few months. She still felt there were parts of Jackson she hadn't been allowed to see, and the differences in their worlds were vast. But looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, she pushed those thoughts aside. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes, I will." The ring slid onto her finger, cool and heavy, a physical reminder of the enormous change her life was about to undergo. The wedding was planned for Jackson's family estate in Aspen, Colorado, a sprawling mountain retreat with views that took Olivia's breath away. As preparations began, she started to meet members of Jackson's inner circle. His younger brother Ethan arrived a week before the wedding, and the resemblance between the brothers was striking, though Ethan lacked the easy charm that came so naturally to Jackson. Where Jackson was warm and expressive, Ethan was reserved and watchful, with the same piercing blue eyes that seemed to look straight through her. "Welcome to the family," Ethan said when they were introduced, his handshake firm, but his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Jackson has told me a lot about you." "All good things, I hope," Olivia replied, trying to mask her discomfort under his scrutiny. "He's certainly enchanted," Ethan responded, his tone making the word sound less like a compliment and more like a diagnosis. As the wedding day approached, Olivia began to notice the subtle ways in which Jackson's family and business associates regarded her, with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes, with conversations that would stop when she entered a room, with questions about her background that felt more like interrogations than friendly interest. "Don't mind them," Jackson assured her when she mentioned it. "They're just protective. The Harrington name comes with certain expectations. They'll warm up to you once they see how happy you make me." But as Olivia stood in the bridal suite on the morning of her wedding, watching snowflakes drift against the panoramic windows of the mountain estate, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something much more complex and potentially treacherous than a simple marriage. The diamond on her finger caught the light, sending prisms dancing across the wall, beautiful but sharp-edged, like the path that lay ahead of her. The wedding ceremony itself was a spectacle befitting the Harrington name. The glass chapel, built specifically for the occasion, stood like a crystal palace against the snowy backdrop of the Aspen Mountains. 200 of America's most influential people filled the pews: senators, tech moguls, Hollywood stars, and old money families whose names were etched on buildings across the country. Olivia felt like she was floating through a dream as she walked down the aisle in her custom-designed gown. Jackson stood at the altar, looking at her with such adoration that it momentarily silenced the whispers of doubt that had plagued her in recent days. This was real. This was happening. She, Olivia Mitchell from Key West, was marrying into one of America's most powerful dynasties. "You look beautiful," Jackson whispered as she reached him, his eyes glistening with what appeared to be tears of joy. The ceremony was flawless, the exchange of vows heartfelt. Yet Olivia couldn't help but notice the stiff posture of Jackson's mother, Eleanor, in the front row, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Beside her sat Jackson's sister, Victoria, whose calculating gaze seemed to be assessing Olivia's worth with every passing second. And then there was Ethan, standing as his brother's best man, his expression unreadable as he handed over the rings. The reception that followed was lavish beyond Olivia's wildest imagination. Ice sculptures, rare orchids flown in from around the world, a 7-tier cake adorned with edible gold leaf and champagne that flowed like water. Yet as the evening progressed, Olivia found herself increasingly isolated despite being the center of attention. "Congratulations," Eleanor Harrington said coolly when they finally spoke, the matriarch's diamond necklace glinting as harshly as her eyes. "I do hope you'll adapt quickly to our way of life. The Harrington name carries responsibilities." "I'm looking forward to learning," Olivia replied, maintaining her dignity despite the clear implication that she was out of her depth. "Indeed," Eleanor smiled without warmth. "Learning is essential, especially about the people we choose to align ourselves with." Before Olivia could respond, Eleanor was whisked away by a senator's wife, leaving her remark hanging in the air like a veiled threat. Later, as Olivia sipped champagne near one of the grand fireplaces, she overheard fragments of a heated conversation coming from a nearby alcove. "Completely irresponsible, even by your standards, Jackson." It was Ethan's voice, tense with controlled anger. "It's my life, my choice," Jackson responded, his usual smooth tone edged with irritation. "After everything that happened with Meridian Investments, the board is already questioning your judgment, and now this hasty marriage to someone you barely know." "Enough!" Jackson's voice was sharp. "Olivia is my wife now. That's the end of it." There was a pause before Ethan spoke again, his voice lower, but still audible to Olivia. "For your sake, I hope you know what you're doing. There are people watching your every move, waiting for you to make another mistake." The conversation ended abruptly, and Olivia quickly moved away, her heart racing. What was Meridian Investments? What mistake had Jackson made? The question swirled in her mind, but she plastered a smile on her face as Jackson emerged from the alcove and made his way back to her side. "Everything okay?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Just my brother being overprotective." "As usual," Jackson replied, sliding an arm around her waist. "Nothing for you to worry about, my love." The honeymoon was set for a private island in the Caribbean that the Harringtons owned, a fact Olivia hadn't known until Jackson mentioned it casually, as if everyone had a tropical island in their family portfolio. But the night before they were due to leave, Jackson received a phone call that changed their plans. "I'm so sorry, Olivia," he said, looking genuinely distressed as he ended the call. "There's an urgent situation with one of our subsidiaries in Seattle. I need to fly out there immediately." "I'll come with you," she offered, disappointed but understanding. Jackson shook his head. "This will be all boardrooms and legal documents, not exactly honeymoon material. Why don't you go to the island as planned? The staff is expecting you, and I'll join you in a day or two once this is resolved." Reluctantly, Olivia agreed. Next morning, she found herself on the Harrington private jet, flying to a honeymoon destination without her husband of less than 24 hours. The island was paradise incarnate: white sand beaches, crystalline waters, and a villa that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. But its beauty was lost on Olivia as she wandered its empty rooms alone, the absence of Jackson a tangible thing. On her second night alone, curiosity got the better of her. She opened Jackson's laptop, which he had left behind in his haste to reach Seattle. To her surprise, it wasn't password protected. Perhaps he had nothing to hide, or perhaps he never expected her to look. What she found sent her world tilting on its axis. News articles about Meridian Investments, the company Ethan had mentioned, filled the browser history. According to the reports, Meridian had been accused of serious financial improprieties 6 months earlier, with allegations of fund mismanagement and possible fraud. Jackson had been on the board of directors but had stepped down just before the scandal broke. Further searches revealed more troubling information. Harrington Enterprises had been involved in several controversial projects: a resort development that had destroyed protected wetlands, energy contracts in countries with questionable human rights records, and what appeared to be complex financial maneuvers that skirted the edges of legality. Most disturbing of all was an email thread between Jackson and someone identified only as L, discussing what they referred to as contingency plans if certain arrangements were discovered. The language was vague and careful, but the implication was clear: they were hiding something significant. Olivia closed the laptop, her hands trembling. Who had she married? Was Jackson involved in something illegal? And if so, what did that mean for her? She tried calling him, but the call went straight to voicemail. "Hi, it's me," she said after the beep, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Just checking in. Hope everything's going well in Seattle. I miss you." Sleep eluded her that night as questions spun through her mind. By morning, she had made a decision. She couldn't stay on the island alone with her suspicions growing by the hour. She would fly to Seattle and confront Jackson directly. The Sakshi. Harrington jet was at her disposal, and within hours she was airborne again, heading for Seattle. She hadn't told Jackson she was coming, partly because she couldn't reach him, but also because a part of her wanted to see his unguarded reaction to her arrival. Seattle greeted her with characteristic rain and gray skies. That matched her mood. She took a taxi directly to the Harrington Tower, a sleek skyscraper in the heart of downtown. At the reception desk, she identified herself as Mrs. Harrington, a name that still felt foreign on her tongue. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. "Mrs. Harrington? I wasn't aware Mr. Harrington's wife was joining him." "It's a surprise," Olivia responded with a smile she didn't feel. "I see. Well, Mr. Harrington is in a meeting right now in the executive conference room on the 50th floor." Armed with a visitor's badge, Olivia rode the elevator to the 50th floor, her heart pounding against her ribs. The conference room wasn't hard to find. It was behind glass walls at the end of a long corridor. As she approached, she could see several people seated around a large table, Jackson at the head, his back to her. Olivia was about to push open the door when she saw a woman lean close to Jackson, her hand resting intimately on his arm. She was striking, tall, with cascading dark hair and the polished look of someone accustomed to wealth and power. What froze Olivia in place wasn't the woman's beauty, but the familiarity with which she touched Jackson, and the way he turned to her with a smile Olivia recognized, intimate, genuine, unguarded. A passing executive noticed Olivia standing there. "Can I help you find someone?" His question caught the attention of those in the conference room. Jackson turned, his expression morphing from annoyance at the interruption to shock as his eyes locked with Olivia's. "Olivia," he said, rising quickly to his feet, "what are you doing here?" The dark-haired woman removed her hand from Jackson's arm, but her eyes remained steady on Olivia, assessing rather than embarrassed. "I thought I'd surprise my husband," Olivia replied, her voice remarkably calm considering the storm raging inside her. "But it seems I'm the one who's surprised." Jackson was beside her in an instant, guiding her away from the conference room with a hand on her lower back that once felt protective, but now felt controlling. "This isn't what it looks like," he began, the familiar refrain of the guilty. Then, "What is it, Jackson? Who is she?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That's Lauren Davis. She's our chief legal counsel and an old friend." "How old of a friend?" Olivia pressed, remembering the initial L from the emails she'd found. Jackson's hesitation was answer enough. "It's complicated, Olivia. There are aspects of my business and my past that are difficult to explain." "Try me," she challenged, crossing her arms, "because right now I'm wondering if anything you've told me is true." Before Jackson could respond, the elevator doors opened and Ethan Harrington stepped out. He stopped short when he saw them, his expression shifting from surprise to something like resignation. "Olivia," he acknowledged with a slight nod, "this is unexpected." "Apparently, I have a talent for showing up where I'm not expected," she replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Ethan's gaze moved between her and Jackson, taking in the tension. "I see you've met Lauren." "Not formally," Olivia said, "though she seems quite comfortable with my husband." "Olivia, please," Jackson started, but Ethan cut him off. "She deserves the truth, Jackson, all of it." There was a weight to Ethan's words that suggested he was talking about more than just Lauren Davis. Jackson's face hardened. "This isn't the time or place." "It never is with you," Ethan replied coolly before turning to Olivia. "If you want answers, I can give them to you." but I guarantee you won't like what you hear." Olivia looked between the two brothers. Jackson, whose charming facade was cracking to reveal something darker beneath, and Ethan, whose reserve now seemed less like coldness and more like caution. In that moment, she realized she had married, not just a man, but into a web of secrets she was only beginning to uncover. The tension in Jackson's private office was palpable as Olivia sat across from the two Harrington brothers. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seattle skyline blurred behind sheets of water that mirrored the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Start talking," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Jackson paced like a caged animal, his usual composure fractured. "Olivia, you have to understand, business at our level involves complexities." "Complexities," she repeated flatly. "Is that what you call lying to your wife?" "I never lied to you," Jackson insisted, stopping to face her. "I just omitted certain details that would only worry you unnecessarily." Ethan, who had been leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, let out a humorless laugh. "That's rich, even coming from you, Jackson." "You're not helping," Jackson snapped at his brother. "I'm not trying to help you," Ethan replied coolly. "I'm trying to help her." He nodded toward Olivia. "She deserves to know what she's married into." "Then tell me," Olivia demanded, her patience wearing thin. Ethan held his brother's gaze for a long moment before turning to Olivia. Meridian Investments wasn't just a company Jackson was on the board of. It was a shell corporation he created to hide certain financial arrangements from regulatory oversight. "It was completely legal," Jackson interjected. "Aggressive tax strategy, nothing more." "Until it wasn't," Ethan countered. "The SEC has been investigating for months. They haven't filed charges yet, but it's just a matter of time." Olivia felt as though the floor was shifting beneath her. "Are you saying Jackson could go to prison?" "No one is going to prison," Jackson insisted, his voice rising. "The investigation will find nothing because there's nothing to find." "Tell that to the investors who lost millions," Ethan said quietly. "And Lauren?" Olivia asked, the name like acid on her tongue. "Where does she fit into all this?" The brothers exchanged a glance that confirmed her worst suspicions. "Lauren and I were involved," Jackson admitted reluctantly. "It ended before I met you, Olivia. She's just helping with the legal strategy for Meridian now." "That didn't look like just legal strategy in that conference room," Olivia replied. The image of Lauren's hand on Jackson's arm burned into her memory. "This is exactly why I didn't tell you," Jackson said, frustration evident in his voice. "You're jumping to conclusions based on one moment taken out of context." "Then give me context," Olivia challenged. Before Jackson could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "I have to take this. It's the board chairman." He looked at Ethan. "Don't make this worse while I'm gone." As soon as the door closed behind Jackson, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Ethan moved to sit in the chair his brother had vacated, his posture less rigid now that they were alone. "There's more," he said quietly. "Things Jackson won't tell you because he's too proud or too ashamed." Olivia steeled herself. "I want to know everything." "The real reason Jackson was so quick to marry you wasn't just love at first sight." Ethan began, his blue eyes so similar to his brother's yet somehow more honest, fixed on hers. The Harrington family name needed rehabilitation. The Meridian scandal was threatening to go public, and Jackson needed a diversion, a new narrative for the press to focus on. The environmental crusader and the beautiful marine biologist, it was perfect. The words hit Olivia like physical blows. "You're saying our entire relationship was a publicity stunt?" "No," Ethan shook his head. "I'm saying it started that way. I believe he genuinely fell for you as time went on, but the initial pursuit, the whirlwind romance, the rush to marriage, all of that was calculated." Olivia thought back to their first meeting at the conference, how Jackson had sought her out, how quickly he had become interested in her research. Had it all been a strategy? "And Lauren?" she asked, needing to know the full extent of the deception. Ethan hesitated. "She and Jackson have a complicated history. They've been on again, off again for years. She was displeased when he announced his engagement to you." "Were they together when he met me?" "Not officially. Ethan replied carefully. But Lauren has always been Jackson's fallback, his safe space. I don't think that ever fully ended, even after you came into the picture. Olivia's mind was reeling. Everything she thought she knew about her relationship with Jackson was being systematically demolished, replaced by a reality far more calculated and cynical than she could have imagined. Why are you telling me all this? She asked Ethan. He's your brother. Because I've watched Jackson hurt people for years with his recklessness and self-interest, Ethan replied, a hint of old pain in his voice. And because you remind me of someone who deserved better than what a Harrington man gave her. Before Olivia could press him on who that someone was, the office door flew open. Jackson stood there, his face ashen. The board just called an emergency meeting, he said, his voice strained. The SEC has executed search warrants at 3 of our offices. They've seized records related to Meridian. Ethan stood, his expression grim but unsurprised. It was only a matter of time. This isn't a told-you-so moment, Ethan, Jackson snapped. This is serious. They're coming after me personally. Olivia watched the exchange with a growing sense of detachment, as if she were observing strangers. In a way, they were. The man she had married was rapidly being revealed as someone she didn't know at all. What happens now? She asked, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. Jackson turned to her, seeming to remember her presence. I need to meet with the board and our legal team. Ethan, you should be there too. He hesitated, then added, Olivia, it would be best if you went back to the hotel. This could take hours. Of course, she replied, a calm settling over her that came from somewhere beyond the shock and betrayal. Your corporate crisis takes precedence over your marriage crisis. That's not fair, Jackson protested. This situation could affect everything, our future, our security. What future? Olivia asked quietly. The one based on lies? Jackson's expression hardened. We'll discuss this later when you've had time to process everything. The car will take you back to the Four Seasons. After they left, Olivia remained in the silent office, rain still streaming down the windows as thunder rumbled in the distance. She had never felt more alone, adrift in a world of wealth and deceit that was alien to her. She didn't go back to the hotel. Instead, she took a taxi to a small coffee shop several blocks away, needing neutral territory to think. With a steaming cup of tea in front of her, she tried to make sense of the revelations of the past few hours. Her marriage was a sham, a public relations strategy crafted to distract from potential financial misdealing. Her husband was potentially facing serious legal troubles, and there was another woman, one with history, with connections to the Harrington world that Olivia could never match. Is this seat taken? Olivia looked up, startled to find Ethan standing beside her table, rain glistening in his dark hair. How did you find me? She asked. The car service has GPS tracking, he replied, sliding into the chair across from her. When the driver reported you hadn't gone to the hotel, I had them ping your location. That's invasive, she noted, though without much heat. She was too emotionally drained for indignation. Ethan had the grace to look apologetic. The Harringtons are big on knowing where everyone is at all times. It's part of the controlling culture you've married into. He paused. I was concerned about you. Why would you be concerned about me? We barely know each other. Because I know what it's like to have your world turned upside down by Jackson's actions, he said simply. And because no one deserves to be alone when they're going through that. There was something in the way he said it that hinted at a deeper history, a personal cost he had paid for his brother's behavior. What did he do to you? Olivia asked. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns in the condensation on the table. That's a long story for another time, he finally said. Right now we need to focus on your situation. What do you want to do? The question caught her off guard. No one in the Harrington orbit had asked what she wanted since this nightmare began. I don't know, she admitted. I can't stay with him, not after learning all this, but I don't know how to extricate myself from whatever this is. It won't be easy, Ethan warned. The Harringtons protect their own, and that includes protecting the family image. Jackson won't want a divorce so soon after the wedding. It would raise too many questions, attract exactly the kind of attention he's trying to avoid. So, supposed to stay in a fraudulent marriage to protect his reputation. The idea was absurd, infuriating. "No," Ethan replied, surprising her. "I'm saying you should be prepared for resistance, but I'll help you if you want." Olivia studied him, trying to understand his motivation. "Why would you go against your own family for me?" A shadow passed over Ethan's features. "Because the Harrington way of handling problems has caused enough damage. Because I'm tired of watching history repeat itself." He met her gaze directly. "And because I think you deserve better than being collateral damage in my brother's life." There was a conviction in his voice that resonated with something inside her, a lifeline in the chaos her life had become. "What do we do now?" she asked. "First we get you somewhere safe, somewhere not connected to the Harrington name." He pulled out his phone and started typing. "I have a friend who owns a cabin outside the city. You can stay there while we figure out next steps." "We?" The word felt strange, forming an alliance with this man she barely knew against the husband she thought she had known. Ethan looked up from his phone, a hint of uncertainty in his expression. "Unless you'd rather handle this alone, I would understand if you don't trust another Harrington at this point." Olivia considered her options. She was in an unfamiliar city, married to a man who had deceived her, facing a family with vast resources and influence. And here was Ethan, offering help with no clear benefit to himself. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, needing to hear his answer. "You shouldn't, not entirely," he replied with unexpected honesty. "But I'm the only Harrington who's telling you the truth right now. That has to count for something." Their gazes held across the table, rain drumming against the windows, the world outside growing darker as evening approached. In Ethan's eyes, Olivia saw something she hadn't expected. Integrity, perhaps, or at least a weariness with deception that matched her own. "Okay," she finally said. "I'll go to the cabin. But this isn't me trusting you. This is me taking the least worst option right now." A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "Fair enough, the car is waiting outside whenever you're ready." As they left the coffee shop, Olivia's phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. "Where are you? We need to talk. Come back to the hotel immediately." She turned off her phone without replying and followed Ethan into the rainy Seattle night. The city lights reflected in puddles at their feet as they made their way to a waiting black SUV. As the car moved through the urban landscape toward the mountains beyond, Olivia watched the skyscrapers of Seattle recede in the side mirror. With them went the life she had thought she was building, the future she had imagined with Jackson. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also the first honest moment she'd experienced since stepping into the Harrington world. The cabin was nothing like what Olivia had expected from something associated with the Harrington name. Nestled among towering pines, it was rustic and modest, a far cry from the opulence she had grown accustomed to over the past months. Built of weathered cedar with a stone chimney, it looked like it had been part of the landscape for generations. "This place belonged to my grandfather before the Harrington fortune," Ethan explained as he unlocked the door. "He left it to me specifically outside the family trust. Jackson doesn't even know it exists." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom with surprisingly modern fixtures. The furniture was well worn but sturdy, and the walls were lined with bookshelves filled with everything from classics to scientific journals. "It's not the Four Seasons," Ethan said, a hint of apology in his voice as he set her bag down. "It's perfect," Olivia replied, and meant it. After months of manicured luxury that had turned out to be as artificial as her marriage, the cabin's honest simplicity was refreshing. Ethan built a fire while Olivia explored the space, noting the absence of technology. No television, no internet. Router, just a landline phone and an old radio on a shelf. "There's no cell service up here," Ethan informed her, reading her thoughts. "The landline works for emergencies, but otherwise you're off the grid." "Good," Olivia said, thinking of Jackson's increasingly frantic texts before she'd turned off her phone. "I could use some time to think without interruption." Ethan seemed hesitant to leave, lingering by the door. "There's food in the pantry and firewood stacked on the porch. I should be back tomorrow with more supplies and..." Well, probably news about Jackson and the SEC investigation. Thank you, Olivia said, surprised at the sincerity in her voice. For all of this? Don't thank me yet, he replied grimly. This situation is going to get worse before it gets better. After Ethan left, Olivia stood at the window, watching his taillights disappear down the winding road that led back to civilization. The silence that enveloped the cabin was profound, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the gentle patter of rain on the roof. For the first time since her wedding day, she felt like she could breathe. She made herself a cup of tea from the supplies in the kitchen and curled up in an armchair by the fire, trying to process everything that had happened. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching. Her heart raced. Had Jackson somehow found her? But when she peered through the window, she saw Ethan's car returning. He emerged carrying several bags and what looked like a laptop case. Sorry, he said when she opened the door. Change of plans. Jackson called an emergency family meeting for tomorrow morning. If I'm not there, it will raise suspicions. I thought it would be better if I stayed here tonight and went back to the city first thing. Olivia nodded, relieved not to be alone with her thoughts. There's another bedroom. I'll make us some dinner from whatever's in the pantry. As she prepared a simple meal of pasta and jarred sauce, Ethan set up his laptop at the small dining table. I'm not supposed to have this, he explained when he caught her looking. It's an older model that's not on the company network. Jackson doesn't know I kept it. Why all the secrecy? Olivia asked, setting plates on the table. Ethan's expression was serious. Because I've been gathering evidence of Jackson's financial manipulations for months. I knew this day would come eventually, and I wanted to be prepared. Olivia nearly dropped the serving spoon. Evidence? What are you going to do with it? That depends, he said, looking up at her. Originally, I was collecting it as insurance to protect myself when the investigation started. The Harrington corporate structure is deliberately complex. Subsidiaries within subsidiaries, offshore accounts, shell companies. It's designed so that no single person knows everything. Plausible deniability. Except you figured it out, Olivia observed. A grim smile crossed Ethan's face. I've always been the detail person in the family. Jackson is the visionary, the charismatic leader. I'm the one who reads the fine print. They ate in thoughtful silence for a while before Olivia voiced the question that had been bothering her. Earlier you mentioned that I reminded you of someone who deserved better than what a Harrington man gave her. Who were you talking about? Ethan set down his fork, his expression closing off briefly before he seemed to make a decision. Her name was Rebecca. She was brilliant, an environmental lawyer who was passionate about corporate accountability. We were engaged 5 years ago. What happened? Jackson happened, Ethan said simply. He didn't approve of her because she wasn't from the right social circle. He saw her as a liability to the family name, so he had her investigated, dug up an old misdemeanor charge from a college protest, and made sure it got to the partners. At her law firm, she lost her shot at partnership, and our relationship couldn't survive the strain. That's awful, Olivia said, genuinely horrified. Your own brother sabotaged your relationship? The Harringtons protect their interests above all else, Ethan replied, a practiced detachment in his voice that couldn't quite mask the old pain. Rebecca wasn't an acceptable addition to the dynasty, so she had to go. Is that why you're helping me? Because you see parallels? Ethan considered this. Partly, but also because when I saw you at the wedding, looking like you were trying so hard to belong in a world that was already closing ranks against you, I knew you were being set up to fail, just like Rebecca was. Set up to fail. The Harringtons never had any intention of truly accepting you, Ethan explained. You were useful to Jackson as a distraction from the Meridian scandal, as an environmental credential he could point to, but Eleanor and Victoria were already planning your eventual exit. A discreet divorce in a year or two once your public relations value had been exhausted. The revelations stung, even though Olivia had already begun to suspect as much. And you, what was your plan for me? I didn't have one, Ethan admitted. I was trying to stay out of it, to be honest. After Rebecca, I distanced myself from family matters as much as possible. I showed up for the important events, played my role, but kept my real life separate. What changed? You did, he said simply. When you showed up in Seattle, when I saw the look on your face in that conference room, I couldn't be complicit in another person being chewed up by the Harrington machine. Olivia wasn't sure if she should feel grateful or insulted. So I'm your redemption project, your chance to make up for not protecting Rebecca. No, Ethan replied, meeting her gaze directly. You're someone who deserves the truth and the chance to make your own informed decisions, something the Harringtons rarely allow anyone outside the inner circle. After dinner, Ethan showed her what he had been collecting: financial records, email exchanges, board meeting minutes. The evidence painted a damning picture of Jackson's activities, particularly with regard to Meridian Investments. This looks, Olivia began, struggling to find a word that wasn't incriminating. Illegal, Ethan supplied, because it is. Not in the obvious way that triggers immediate arrests, but in the calculated, sophisticated way that takes federal investigators months or years to unravel. And you've known all this time? I suspected at first, he corrected. Then I started digging. I only confirmed it a few weeks before your wedding. Why didn't you stop it? The wedding, I mean. Ethan looked genuinely regretful. I tried to talk to Jackson. He accused me of jealousy, said I was trying to sabotage his happiness because I couldn't find my own. By then, the media coverage of your romance was in full swing, and any disruption would have brought exactly the kind of attention to Meridian that Jackson was trying to avoid. So you let me walk into a sham marriage instead, Olivia concluded, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. I should have tried harder, Ethan acknowledged. Found a way to warn you. It's something I'll have to live with. The fire had died down to embers, casting the cabin in a soft orange glow. Outside, the rain had stopped, and moonlight filtered through the clouds, silvering the wet leaves beyond the windows. What happens tomorrow? Olivia asked, suddenly exhausted by revelations and regrets. Tomorrow I go to the family meeting and find out how bad the SEC investigation really is, Ethan said. And you decide what you want to do next. What are my options? You could file for an annulment claiming fraud. With what we know now, you'd have grounds, but the Harringtons would fight it, and the legal battle would be ugly and public. Or you could negotiate a settlement, agree to a discreet separation now and a quiet divorce once the SEC matter is resolved, in exchange for financial security. Neither option sounded appealing. Both required her to continue interacting with the Harringtons, to remain tethered to a family that had seen her as nothing more than a convenient distraction. Is there a third option? She asked. Ethan hesitated. You could disappear. Not literally. I'm not suggesting anything dramatic, but you could go back to your life in Key West, resume your research, act as if the whirlwind romance with Jackson Harrington was just that, a romance that didn't work out. The media would lose interest eventually. And Jackson would let me go that easily? No, Ethan admitted, which is why you'd need leverage. He nodded toward the laptop. Information is power in the Harrington world. With what I've gathered, you could ensure Jackson keeps his distance. Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cabin's temperature. You're suggesting I blackmail your brother? I'm suggesting you protect yourself with the same tools the Harringtons have, always used to protect themselves, Ethan corrected. Call it insurance, not blackmail. The idea made Olivia deeply uncomfortable. She had built her career on integrity, on scientific honesty. The thought of using threats and leverage, even for self-protection, went against everything she believed. Taotis, I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Ethan agreed, closing the laptop. You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging. They said goodnight awkwardly, two virtual strangers bound by circumstance and shared knowledge of a powerful family's secrets. Olivia retreated to one of the bedrooms, but sleep eluded her. She lay awake listening to the sounds of the forest around the cabin, thinking about how quickly her life had unraveled. 3 months ago, She had been a dedicated marine biologist with a modest life in Key West. Now she was the deceived wife of a potentially criminal businessman hiding in a cabin in the Pacific Northwest, contemplating blackmail and divorce. She must have drifted off eventually, because she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet conversation. For a moment she was disoriented, the unfamiliar bedroom confusing her sleep-addled mind. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and with them a renewed sense of betrayal and loss. Wrapping herself in a blanket, she padded out to the main room to find Ethan on the landline phone, his expression grim as he listened. To the person on the other end, "I understand," he was saying. "Yes, I'll be there as soon as I can." He hung up and turned to find Olivia watching him. "That was Victoria. The SEC investigation is worse than we thought. They've frozen several Harrington Enterprise accounts and subpoenaed records going back 5 years. The board is meeting in an hour." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "And Jackson knows you're with me." Olivia felt her heart rate accelerate. "How?" "The car service log. He checked it this morning and saw that I had them ping your location yesterday. He's demanding I bring you back to Seattle immediately." "And will you?" She held her breath, suddenly unsure of where Ethan's loyalties truly lay. He met her gaze, steadily. "That depends on what you want, Olivia. This is your decision now." The weight of choice settled on her shoulders as the morning light streamed through the cabin windows, illuminating the crossroads at which she now stood. The drive back to Seattle was tense with unspoken possibilities. Olivia had made her decision after a long morning of soul-searching, watching the sun rise over the pine-covered mountains, while Ethan gave her the space she needed to think. "I'm not going back to Jackson," she had told him finally. "But I'm not going to disappear either, and I'm definitely not going to use your evidence as leverage or blackmail." "Then what's your plan?" Ethan had asked, respect in his eyes despite his obvious concern. "I'm going to face this head-on," Olivia had replied with newfound determination. "I want a clean break, with no secrets or manipulations. That's the only way I'll ever be free of the Harrington shadow." Now, as they approached the gleaming towers of downtown Seattle, Olivia steeled herself for the confrontation ahead. The Harrington Enterprises headquarters loomed before them, its glass facade reflecting the rare Seattle sunshine like a warning beacon. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said as they pulled into the private parking garage. "I could take you to the airport instead." "Running won't solve anything," Olivia replied, straightening her shoulders. "I need closure, and I need to look Jackson in the eye when I tell him it's over." The executive floor was buzzing with activity when they stepped off the elevator. Assistants scurried between offices, legal counsel huddled in corners speaking in hushed tones, and the atmosphere crackled with tension. "Mrs. Harrington," a surprised assistant acknowledged as they passed. "Mr. Harrington is in the main conference room with the board." "Thank you," Olivia replied with a calm she didn't entirely feel. "Olivia," Ethan placed a hand on her arm, stopping her before they reached the conference room. "Whatever happens in there, remember that you have options. You have your own strength." Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them that transcended their brief acquaintance. In that instant, Olivia realized that something had shifted during their time at the cabin. A connection had formed, tentative but genuine, based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. "I know," she said softly. "Thank you for reminding me." The conference room fell silent as they entered. Around the long table sat the Harrington Enterprises Board of Directors, a collection of powerful men and women whose expressions ranged from curious to openly hostile. At the head of the table stood Jackson, his face a mask of controlled fury. "How kind of you both to join us," he said, his voice dripping sarcasm. "Ethan, your timing is impeccable as always. And Olivia, my dear wife, how thoughtful of you to emerge from hiding." "Jackson," Olivia acknowledged, refusing to be intimidated, "I believe we need to talk." "Indeed we do," he agreed with a tight smile. "But first, the board has some pressing matters to discuss. Perhaps you'd like to wait in my office." "Actually," Ethan interjected, "anything said in this room is relevant to Olivia now. She's your wife, after all, and what affects you affects her. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Eleanor Harrington, seated near her eldest son, narrowed her eyes at Ethan. "This is a private board meeting," she objected. "Family, or not, Olivia has no place here." "On the contrary," came a new voice from the doorway. "Mrs. Harrington's presence could be quite valuable." All heads turned to see Lauren Davis entering the room, a portfolio under her arm and a calculating expression on her face. "Lauren," Jackson greeted her, his relief evident. "I'm glad you're here. We were just discussing the SEC investigation, I presume." Lauren finished for him, taking a seat at the table as if she belonged there. "And the potential implications for the company now that they've frozen the offshore accounts." Jackson's face paled. "That information is confidential." "Not anymore," Lauren replied coolly. "The SEC has expanded their investigation. They're looking at all of Harrington Enterprises now, not just Meridian." The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Olivia watched the chaos unfold, feeling strangely detached from it all. None of this was her world, had never been her world. She had simply been drawn into it by a man who had seen her as a useful accessory, not a partner. "What exactly are they looking for?" one board member demanded. "Evidence of systematic financial irregularities," Lauren answered, "which, as we all know, they're likely to find if they dig deep enough." "Careful, Lauren," Jackson warned, his charm evaporating in the face of crisis. Lauren raised an eyebrow. "I'm being cautious, Jackson. More cautious than you've been." She turned to address the room. "The SEC has offered a deal. They're willing to focus their investigation solely on Meridian Investments and its direct management, meaning you, Jackson, if the company agrees to certain compliance measures and financial penalties." "What kind of financial penalties?" Eleanor asked sharply. "Substantial," Lauren admitted, "but less catastrophic than a full investigation would be." The implications hung in the air. Jackson was being offered up as the sacrificial lamb to save the larger Harrington empire. "This is ridiculous," Jackson protested. "I built this company into what it is today. Without me, Harrington Enterprises would still be a regional energy supplier, not a global conglomerate." "And your ambition may be what destroys it," Eleanor retorted, her voice cold. "The board needs to consider what's best for the company's future." "Mother," Jackson looked genuinely shocked. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious when it comes to preserving what your father built," Eleanor replied. "The Harrington legacy is bigger than any one person, even you." As the argument intensified, Olivia caught Ethan's eye across the room. He gave her a slight nod, understanding passing between them. This was her moment to reclaim her life. "Excuse me," she said, her clear voice cutting through the heated discussion. All eyes turned to her. "While you debate who to sacrifice for the company's sake, I've made my own decision. I'm leaving." Jackson looked at her in disbelief. "Leaving? You can't just leave, Olivia. You're my wife." "A wife you married for public relations purposes," she replied calmly. "A wife you continued to lie to while maintaining a relationship with someone else." She glanced at Lauren, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "That's not true," Jackson protested, but without conviction. "Isn't it?" Olivia challenged. "You needed a distraction from the Meridian scandal, a new narrative for the press. The environmental crusader and the beautiful marine biologist. Wasn't that how you pitched it to your PR team?" Jackson's silence was confirmation. "Enough. I'll be filing for an annulment," Olivia continued, her voice steady, "on grounds of fraud. I won't ask for anything except the restoration of my research funding, which was promised to my team before all this began. Those scientists, and that work shouldn't suffer because of your deception." "You can't prove fraud," Jackson countered, desperation creeping into his voice. "Actually, she can," Ethan spoke up, stepping to Olivia's side. "I've offered to testify about the true motivations behind your marriage, if necessary." The betrayal in Jackson's eyes as he looked at his brother was palpable. "You would do that? Turn against your own family?" "I'm not turning against the family," Ethan replied. "I'm standing for the truth. There's a difference, Jackson. One you never understood." Eleanor rose from her seat, her regal bearing undiminished by the crisis unfolding around her. "This is most unfortunate timing," she said, addressing Olivia directly for perhaps the first time. "A divorce now would only add to the negative publicity surrounding the company." "I'm sure your PR team can spin it," Olivia replied, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. After all, they managed to make a calculated business arrangement look like a love story for the ages. A flicker of something like respect passed through Eleanor's eyes. "You're more perceptive than we gave you credit for, Ms. Mitchell." "That's Dr. Mitchell," Olivia corrected her. "And yes, I am." The atmosphere in the room had shifted. What had begun as a corporate crisis meeting had transformed into the dismantling of her sham marriage, and Olivia found herself surprisingly at peace with it. "I'll have my lawyers contact yours," she told Jackson. "I hope we can handle this discreetly for everyone's sake." "And if I refuse to let you go," Jackson challenged, a last desperate attempt to maintain control. Lauren stood up then, surprising everyone. "Don't be foolish, Jackson. The company can't afford another scandal. An amicable separation is the best option now." "Et tu, Lauren." Jackson's voice was bitter. "After everything we've been through." "This isn't personal," Lauren replied, though her eyes suggested otherwise. "It's business, something you taught me well." Olivia felt a strange sense of pity for Jackson in that moment. For all his wealth and power, he was fundamentally alone, surrounded by people who weighed his value in dollars and public perception rather than genuine connection. "I'll see myself out," Olivia said quietly, turning to leave. "I'll walk you down," Ethan offered, following her to the door. They were silent in the elevator, the enormity of what had just transpired settling around them. When they reached the lobby, Ethan spoke first. "What will you do now?" "Go back to Key West," Olivia replied without hesitation. "Resume my research. Try to forget these past few months ever happened." "Will that be possible?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle. Olivia considered the question. "Not entirely. Some experiences change you, whether you want them to or not. But I can choose what I take from this. I won't let the Harrington family define me or break me." They stepped outside into the bright Seattle day, so at odds with the darkness they had just left behind. "I'd like to stay in touch," Ethan said, surprising her. "Not as a Harrington, just as someone who admires your courage." Olivia studied him, this man who had become an unexpected ally in her darkest hour. "I think I'd like that too," she admitted, "but I need time, space to find myself again." "I understand," he replied, and she believed he truly did. "When you're ready, if you're ever ready, you know how to reach me." 6 months later, Olivia stood on the bow of a research vessel off the coast of Key West, the sun warming her face as she surveyed the coral reef restoration project below. The work was progressing better than expected, the coral beds showing remarkable resilience given the right conditions and protection. Much like herself, Olivia reflected, the annulment had been finalized with surprising ease. Jackson, facing securities fraud charges and the potential collapse of his empire, had acquiesced to her terms without a fight. The media had briefly feasted on the story of their separation, but public interest had quickly moved on to fresher scandals. The Harrington Foundation had honored its commitment to her research, though Olivia suspected Ethan's influence in that decision. They had kept in touch, first through occasional emails about her work, then phone calls that grew increasingly personal as the months passed. "Dr. Mitchell," her research assistant called from behind her. "There's someone here to see you." Olivia turned, shielding her eyes from the sun. A figure stood at the other end of the boat, tall and familiar despite the casual clothes that had replaced the tailored suits she remembered. Ethan Harrington had traded his corporate attire for khakis and a simple blue button-down. His hair, slightly longer than before, ruffled by the sea breeze, but his eyes were the same, clear, honest, seeing her for who she truly was. "Is this a bad time?" he asked as she approached. "Not at all," she replied, unable to suppress a genuine smile. "What brings you to Key West?" "You," he said simply. "And a job offer, actually. I've left Harrington Enterprises, started my own environmental consulting firm. We're working with companies that want to genuinely improve their practices, not just greenwash their image." That's impressive, Olivia acknowledged. A big change from the corporate world. Inspired by you in part, Ethan admitted. Watching you walk away from everything to reclaim your integrity, it made me examine my own compromises. And Jackson? She asked, the name no longer bringing pain. Facing the consequences of his actions, Ethan replied. The company survived, but he stepped down as CEO. Last I heard, he and Lauren were in the Cayman Islands, trying to rebuild their lives together. Olivia nodded, feeling a sense of closure. And your mother? Surprisingly resilient, Ethan said with a small smile. She's taken over as chairwoman of the board. Turns out she's quite good at it. The company's even moving in a more sustainable direction now. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks reflected in the calm waters around them. So, Olivia said after a moment, this job offer, does it involve any coral reef restoration projects? It could, Ethan replied, hope evident in his voice, if the right marine biologist were interested in a partnership. Professional partnership? Olivia asked, a teasing note in her voice. To start with, Ethan said, his eyes never leaving hers, but I'm open to other possibilities when the time is right. Olivia looked out at the horizon, where the ocean met the sky in an endless expanse of possibility. 6 months ago, she had been a woman deceived, caught in a web of lies and manipulation. Now she stood on her own terms, stronger for what she had endured, wiser about human nature and her own resilience. I think, she said finally, turning back to Ethan with a genuine smile, I'd like to hear more about these possibilities over dinner. As they stood together on the deck of the research vessel, the setting sun casting long golden rays across the water, Olivia felt a sense of peace settle over her. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was truly her own to choose. She had entered the Harrington world as a pawn in someone else's game, but she had emerged as the author of her own story. Whatever happened next, whether with Ethan or her research or both, would be her choice, made with clear eyes and an open heart, grounded in truth rather than illusion. And that, Olivia reflected, as Ethan's hand found hers in the fading light, was the most precious freedom of all. Fim de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this journey through Olivia's transformation from a pawn in the Harrington dynasty to the strong, independent woman who reclaimed her life on her own terms. For more captivating stories that explore the complexities of human relationships and personal growth, we've prepared a special playlist of equally moving narratives. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If Olivia and Ethan's story touched your heart, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that delve into life's most challenging moments and the strength we find within ourselves to overcome them.